Hiya, welcome back to Bible Break. We're carrying on with the story of Abram's progress, or perhaps not, as the case might be today. I think our reading today, chapter 16, has a message for our times. So if you want to follow in your Bible, Genesis chapter 16, it might be 15 minutes, might be a bit less today. Genesis 16, reading from the NIV as usual. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant, perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant, Hagar, and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she's pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your servant is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai ill-treated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now with child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers." She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her, "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." That is why the well was called Beer Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Well, I did say to you just a minute ago that I believe that this chapter really does have a message for our time. Because at the heart of this chapter, we could put it in the form of a question. Do you think it's a good idea to try to help God? Do you think it's a good idea to try to help God? And I want to put another thing to you by way of a proposition, which is that sometimes, if not often, it is better to do nothing at all. The best thing to do is absolutely nothing. What do I mean by that? Well, we are so wired that we correctly believe that it is our responsibility to do what we can to make things better, to do what we can to get through life, to do what we can to make our own situation better, to do what we can to look after ourselves and others, to do what we can to make our world better. There is this thing called human responsibility, and I do believe that God expects us to do what we can to make things better. Also, the Bible teaches us in the book of James and elsewhere that faith in God and faith towards God expresses itself in works and in bearing fruit for Him, living fruitful lives. And that means obviously what our belief is, what our motivation is, and what it is that we do to bear fruit and to be fruitful. But I want to say this to you on the basis and on the strength of our reading today. Counterintuitively, perhaps, as I say, in terms of the way that we are wired, we normally feel that we've got to make our contribution, that we've got to do what we can. But I think what our chapter today teaches us is that sometimes we can do a lot more harm than good, even when we feel that we are doing the right thing to make things better. And as was the case with Abram here, particularly if the promise of God, the commandments of God, His design, if these things are clear to us and have been clearly expressed to us and we clearly understand them, then sometimes the best thing to do is to wait for Him to accomplish the promise which He has made to us, to do that which He has promised that He will do. Because if, as is the case with Abram and Sarah here, we stick our own oar in, we can end up doing more harm than good. We can end up complicating matters. We just finished reading at the start of our reading that Abram himself was 86 years old. So that was the reason for his concern, as we saw in the previous chapter, that he was going the way of all the world without having an heir, a son, and that posterity which the Lord had promised him. And now we see Sarai sort of, coming to the conclusion as well that she herself is sterile, that she hasn't borne Abram a son, that she cannot. And so, despite God's promise, despite God's repeated promise, I should say, towards them, Sarai, she's the one who makes the proposition to Abram that they do something, as it were, to give God a helping hand, that they come up with their own answer, and that they come up with their own solution. And this, of course, is that Abraham takes Sarai's maid, servant, and that he sleeps with her so that he may have a child through her. That's what duly happens. It leads to all kinds of complications within the couple, Sarai and Abraham. It doesn't do, it doesn't do Hagar any good. What happens is that Sarai quite naturally becomes jealous, I think, of Hagar, and Hagar maybe looks down on Sarai as she is fruitful, as she is child, and Sarai has not. And so Hagar quite naturally sees herself as the future. So that leads to Sarai moaning and wailing to Abraham, despite the fact that it was her suggestion in the first place. And of course, it then Abram just washes his hands of the whole thing and says, well, she's your servant, you do what you want. So, what this says in terms of their attitude towards Hagar herself, I don't know. All I do know is that God isn't happy, and that God meets Hagar in the desert when she runs away from them. He meets Hagar and Ishmael in the desert. Was she with Ishmael in the desert? No, she's pregnant. She gives birth when she gets back. But she's being so badly treated that she leaves before she gives birth. And God meets her in the desert. She is delighted that God has seen her in her distress. That's the meaning and the point behind the names that she gives to the place and the places. That, God saw her in her distress and in her discomfort. Hagar is delighted on that. God makes the great promise to her that he will bless her and make her fruitful, and that she shall have children and she shall have descendants, and that he will multiply her posterity, beginning with Ishmael, who is, of course, Abraham's firstborn, as far as I'm aware, Abraham's firstborn son. But he is not the promised son. God had made the promise that Abram would have a child with Sarah, who would be the child of promise, the child that God gives, that God will give. And God has not forgotten his promise, and God has not forgotten his resolution, as we saw last time, towards resolutions towards Abraham. And God will hold to what he has said. What they have now done to complicate matters for themselves will not stop God from fulfilling his promise in the way that he has said that he will do it. And in due course, Sarah is with child, and she gives birth to Isaac, who is the promised child. So there's the story. Why do I say that it's a message for our time? Well, it's a message for all times. But let me just explain it to you this way. Maybe you have found yourself, even in recent months, shall we say, you have found yourself in a position where you have found yourself perhaps stuck. You have felt that the society and the country as a whole is stuck, and you have done what was suggested to you or told you that you should do or that you had to do, maybe to get things moving, maybe to keep your job. There could be any number of reasons for the decision or decisions that you have taken. And it could be that because of what you've done, yes, maybe that's kept things moving for you, but that might have made the overall problem and the overall situation a lot more complicated. That is what I am putting to you. And I do believe that faith, unbelief can express itself in jumping in and, coming to the short-term solution. But the long-term solution sometimes requires holding on to what you know to be the promises, the commandments, just what God has done and the way God is and the way God has made us. Sometimes the best thing to do is to hold on to God's promises and do absolutely nothing. There we are. I'll just leave that with you to think upon. Be encouraged that, like I say, if we are too hasty in the decisions that we take, in the things that we do, that may make life more awkward and more difficult for us, but that will not stop God from advancing his purposes. But it's something that I do believe that we need to think upon. And that chapter 16 of Genesis contains very much a message for our time. Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye for now.